The idea that the Earth could have a history that would reach back 4,000 million years is an entirely modern understanding of what is possible. And in this discovery of the archaic, from paleontology, from archaeology, also comes an awareness that much of the world, until very recently, has remained archaic, that tribal structures set in place at the melting of the last glaciers are in place today in many parts of the world, with very complex social structures, religious beliefs, theories of polity, medicine, so forth and so on. But medicine, the key concept here, because these Aboriginal societies that have kept the archaic toolkit, when we sort through that toolkit, there's more there than fish poisons and abortifacients and even contraceptives. What there are psychedelic plants. And again, those of us who have grown up with the assumption of psychedelic plants or even synthetic psychedelic chemistry tend to forget that this has all arrived on the plate of Western civilization in the last 100 years. You know, mescaline was characterized in 1888, harmine in 1928, LSD discovered in 37, not really known until after the war, psilocybin 53, DMT 56, everything made illegal in 66. These things are very new on in the catalog of the artifactoria that we have looted from cultures around the world. And because they are illegal, very little is known about them. The issues raised in the 1960s around these substances have never been settled. The use of them was savagely repressed. The government proved it could repress, but it never was then able to deliver on the only excuse there is for government repression, which is the prosecution of a reasonable social agenda. That never happened. But more is at stake here than American civilization and its attitude towards psychedelics. The whole of the 20th century is characterized by this nostalgia for the archaic. It begins when Picasso brings African masks to Paris in 1910. It even begins earlier than that, when Impressionism deconstructs the photographic realism of late Romanticism and instead turns everything into shimmering light and surfaces. Certainly, pataphysics and Dada, the precursors of surrealism, were, attacks on the sensibilities of the petty bourgeois, for sure, but also a breaking up of the expectations of linear time that had been created in the West since the Industrial Revolution generally. A whole bunch of things, we don't have to dwell on them, but jazz, abstract expressionism, sexual permissiveness, rock and roll, body piercing, house dancing, all of these things are characterized by a nostalgia for the archaic. And I think that this means we have come full circle. Merciliade said this, actually. He said, 20th century culture has the character of a terminal delirium. As we sink toward cultural death, the last 20,000 years of cultural endeavor are swirling around the deathbed in a kind of hallucinogenic storm. We publish every religious text of every cult of every persuasion anywhere in the world. All ruins must be excavated. All artifacts must be reconstructed and studied in one last, final, frantic effort to make sense of it all as we sense ourselves sinking toward, and that's the question, toward what? Toward the yawning grave, toward the fate we probably richly deserve for the way we've conducted our culture over the past 5,000 years? Or, is there the equivalent of a deus ex machina in this story? Is the U.S. cavalry disguised as friendly extraterrestrials or God's avenging angelic horde about to sweep into this sad story and help us out? Well, I sort of come down halfway in between there. I think that built in to our story is the structure of nature, which, believe it or not, supports us in the incredibly peculiar endeavor of history. Because I think nature is an engine for the production and conservation of novelty.